Mark the first year anniversary of the Westgate attack. I remember the 67 people who lost their lives, those who were injured, those who were maimed, like Susan Njuguna, who lost her power of speech, those whose lives changed forever. Your loss is my loss.
Carry on. Carry on.
And your loss is our loss. You are not alone. We are together. And your loss will never be in vain.
Tell us about your experience.
Yes, August 7th, 1998 marked the turning point in my life journey. It was a bright Friday morning. I was going about my business to work when I was actually along Haile Selassie Avenue going to work. So when I reached in between the embassy and the cooperative house, I saw a truck that took a turn and went towards the embassy gates. Then I heard some gunshots, which I understand were hand grenades being thrown at the embassy. Eventually, I saw a man run from the scene of the shooting towards our car, and that's where the huge blast went. I was rescued from the scene of the shooting and taken to Kenyatta National Hospital, where I was admitted for 2 months. And when I got discharged, after both the Kenyan doctors and German surgeons working on me, Dr. Gondi, the late, told me that Douglas, after 6 months, you'll be able to see. But I've been waiting for the last 16 years for the 6 months to come. Well, when I got discharged from hospital, I was very bitter, very angry. I even imagined that if I would have made the people behind the bombing, I would have skinned them alive, piece by piece. Mm-hmm. But then, down the line, I realized that bitterness and anger only but requires healing. Mm. So I started picking up the pieces and have been moving on with my life journey. I went for rehabilitation training at the Kenya Society for the Blind, and eventually went for further rehabilitation training in Richmond, Virginia, in the US, where I learned how to cope as a blind person.
All right, Douglas, you obviously had to go through massive rehabilitation to adapt to your new situation in life. But I'd like to ask you, like you said, at some point you thought if you were to meet those that committed the August 98 bombing, you would, obviously want to take your revenge. But how did you feel, Douglas, after 98, the next attack we see in 2002, and then from 2011 up until Westgate 2013, how do you feel when you see one terrorist attack after another and another and another? How does that make you feel?
Yes, actually, after the embassy bombing in 2000, I and 7 other families and survivors got a chance to go to Oklahoma to visit the Oklahoma bombing families. So we started bonding with them. And we realized that the Oklahoma bombing victims' journey was just as fresh as ours, despite the fact that they had been affected a couple of years earlier. So even if you look at the Westgate, it's just when they're starting their journey, the families and survivors, it's when they're starting their journey. And this journey is a lifetime journey that they have to live with it. I know it's very difficult. It is very frustrating and traumatizing. But the bottom line is, however difficult the situation is, they must accept the situation. Mm-hmm. That is the way it is.
Okay.
However difficult it is, they must just accept it and live with it. And that's the only way the journey to healing just can begin.
Indeed. And we will carry on with that conversation, just accepting that. And you've been able to do that 16 years after the August 1998 bombing. And we'll get back to you, Douglas, even as we carry on with the conversation. But I'd like to speak to the gentleman who's seated right next to you, Edmund. Edmund Ikuba, you lost your wife during the August 98 bombing. You've heard of Maureen Mumbi, who's still trying to pick up the pieces. Tell us about how life was like for you, losing your wife the mother, the nurturer of the family unit?
I think probably words may not be the best. It's more of an emotional thing. As Douglas has said, you learn to accept it. For the first 2 years, I couldn't quite come to terms that people would do such a thing. The mother to my children, the youngest, who's now from 4 candidates, was 2 years. In fact, hardly knows the mother, knows the grandmother. See, those are the problems coming, you know, that's the grandmother. And was 2 years. The one going to University of Eldoret was 3 years. The eldest was, is it 6? Okay, it affected him very much.
How about trying to bring up these very young children? What was that like for you at that time?
This as Douglas has said, this is a lifetime trauma. You try to adjust, but even currently I have one daughter, but still I have to keep recalling that the mother to my 3 boys perished in this 1998 bomb blast. I have to say that probably that death was more painful because of the fact that, one, we had to wait for the bodies to be retrieved from they were among the last 11 bodies.
Wow.
And as beautiful as she was, she died with both her legs severed from her body. Okay, and already the corpse was 4 days in the Ufundi Cooperative House. And she had only done 1 month. Earlier on, she was a housewife. So basically, it's like she was there and she was no more there. And for 16 years, you still see it as happening the other day. So when Mumbi says, okay, she quite can't understand what is happening. It's time, and time in itself is a healing.
Indeed.
Time.
Indeed, time. Yes. And we will carry on with that conversation. Yeah. But indeed, it seems like it happened yesterday. August 98 was 16 years ago. Westgate was 1 year ago. Now, obviously, all of these incidents still very painful in the memories of Kenyans. How did we get here?
That's exactly the question that I want to ask the people here with me on this panel. To my extreme left is Simiyu Werunga, who's a member of the National Steering Committee on Community Policing. We've got Barak Muluka, who is a spokesperson for the Council of Governors, and human rights activist Alamin Kimathi. But I'll start with you, Simiyu. How did we travel on this road up to the point where we have sunk so low in terms of the number of terrorist attacks? ATPU is reporting since 2011, 133 attacks. Between that and 1998, there was only 1 attack. Why are we in the quagmire that we are today?
I think one, as a country, we never learned from 1998. And I want to imagine that even our security agencies never learned or decided to make it deliberate to learn from what we went through. Secondly, I think in 1998, this country relied too much on the Western powers, that we did not capacitate our internal security forces to have the capacity to continuously be alive to the fact that we are a target by virtue of being a country and our geographical location. So the fact that all of a sudden this country started getting hit left, center, and right is a testimony to the fact that subsequent governments never put enough resources to develop our capacity as a country to deal with emerging insecurity issues being led by terrorism.
But beyond that, I mean, it's more geopolitical also. 1998, the attack was the US Embassy. 2002, it was an Israeli hotel. Why is it now that the focus has shifted from Kenya being not just a location, but the target of actual terror attacks, that terrorists would want to hurt us and not our friends?
I was coming there. We need to understand what terrorists look for. You look for a target because it is soft. When it gets hardened, you look to the friend to the target. And if the friend to the target is not hardened, then you start playing around with that friend. Now, unfortunately, Kenya being what it is and being what we are in terms of geopolitics and our political ideology, We've been always in the lead in this region as the benchmark for Western influence. Now, why I said we never learned from 1998 is because subsequently as a country, we should have realized that we are slowly becoming a target as opposed to our friends who are being targeted earlier. And we never put resources in our security apparatus to upgrade our systems to be able to deal with that. Secondly, I think there's also the issue of politics. Now, this has been my take for a very long time, when you politicize the security system, where you find things are happening in this country, and you start talking to elders. To me, this issue of elders has never made sense in how we manage our national security. So for a long time also, this country politicized our security systems, where we are never firm in dealing with issues because of our bad politics.
Okay, but it wasn't bad politics, or maybe it was, that led us into Somalia. Do you think, though, that we should be there?
Do I speak as an ex-military or
From a point of view, from the vantage points, the various vantage points that you have.
But still don't rule out bad politics, because bad politics has led us to where we are. We know very well that most of these ideas that people claim they have were acquired fraudulently. We know very well that we are very soft in dealing with some of these cases that were coming. So that is bad politics, because it's about political leadership of a country. Now, should we be in Somalia?
It's a frontline state. It's the one that has harbored a lot of the terrorists, including the ones that hit us in 1998. Should we be there?
Let me pick it from, should we continue being there? If we pull out today, and in terms of politics and strategic interests, as a country, I think we lose it. So we need to stick there, work very closely within AMISOM, and ensure that we get the objectives of AMISOM that are done well. Now, the biggest problem, which I might share here, is probably even within the AMISOM framework, we are still exporting our bad politics to Somalia.
And what is that? What bad politics are those?
When you start getting vested and personalized interests on the leadership of the people who need to lead and govern Somalia, then you are actually exporting our bad politics.
Barak,
and that has been the biggest problem, why they think initially they liked Kenya being in there, but now they think we've overstayed.
Barak, let's pick it up from there. Bad politics and terrorism, it's costing us lives. 133 attacks, over 200 people dead in the space of 3 years, Barak. Should we fix our politics, or should we fix our security first?
I think we need to fix both, and we also need to recognize that there are at least 2 ways of looking at this challenge. The first one is purely a security issue, where we look at the instruments of self-protection, self-preservation, and we are saying that there are people who are likely to come here to attack us. How are we going to fend ourselves of those attacks? The politics go beyond just our own politics. I think we have lost sight of where this whole matter started, because if we were to truly contextualize this thing in its social dimensions, we would want to admit that we are dealing with very complex global issues. Simiyu Irunga has hinted at them passingly, that if somebody is looking for you and you are well barricaded, they are going to look for the next softer target.
No, but
how do you become this?
Let me step in there for a moment, because Simiyu made that point quite clearly. But the tendency for Kenya is also to externalize the threat, that it's Somalia, it's because of Somalia, it's because of our relationship with the West. A large number of the terrorists who are hitting us today, including in Meketoni, are Kenyan. They hold Kenyan IDs, born in Kenya, bred in Kenya, but choose to fight, hit, and attack Kenyans. Before I get to you, Simiyu, why is that?
So what are the fundamental concerns? Because we are taking a cosmetic approach to the whole challenge, that there are some very fundamental issues of a global nature that in fact, if we were to be very truthful and realistic about this thing, it goes way back to 1948, that it's got its foundations in the Palestinian question. that the first time we were hit was in fact on New Year's Eve in 1981, just as we were crossing from 1980 to 1981, we were hit at the Norfolk because of what was interpreted as our involvement in the Palestinian issue. They said then that we allowed the Israeli paratroopers to stop here for refueling before they got to Entebbe to conduct the raid. I think those issues have been forgotten globally. And as President Kenyatta has said from time to time, we can talk about externalization, we can talk about bad politics, but eventually there must be a globalized approach. We must ask ourselves, who are these people who are hating us? Why do they hate us? To the extent that they keep on doing these things to us. And one is not trying to justify the kind of atrocity that they do visit upon us. Eventually, we must accept that there's a very serious global problem, that there's a clash of civilizations, there's an imposition of cultural values, religious values.
That is understood, and there is a challenge that's being faced.
Eventually be addressed.
There is a challenge that's being faced globally, and in many of the places, if you go to the Netherlands, if you go to the US, it's the same thing. But like I said,
we are in a buffer zone.
We are a buffer zone, but the name Hassan Osodo is not known to a lot of people here. He was killed last year. He was a local terrorist, born in Kakamega. Alamin, are we looking too far outside and not looking into our own house and finding out what the issues are that could breed terrorism? Because much as it is external, and I agree, there's also something breeding here that is far more dangerous, and it's local.
Yes, I think you have a point, and but that links up to where Barak and where Simiyu was also coming from, that we are not looking at what feeds into the geopolitics, what feeds into the global situation. And we have not prepared ourselves internally to cope with that external threat.
Yeah.
Therefore, even if we tend to externalize all the time, there is reason to externalize out there, but there is also reason for us to be more prepared with our responses socially, as well as what the security experts need to be doing. But our responses have always been so weak and at times counterproductive. Right from 1998, well, 81 would be too far away, because at that stage, even internationally, we were not expecting as much as, the proliferation of this activity was not as high as it were.
Yeah.
But from 1998, we would have expected, with the situation globally, we would have expected more than that. And then internally, how did we configure our socio-political setup?
Where do we move then? Because the question that a lot of the people who would be asking here, including Douglas, who for 16 years, like he said, has been waiting for that kind of resolution, where do we move to? How do we resolve the current situation that faces us 1 year after Westgate, 16 years after the August 7th bombing?
I'm not an expert in the security sector, but I would say the first thing that we need to do, let professionals handle, the security sector professionally. Let's not get so emotional to a point of us taking over the security. People who do not have any business running it are already running it, or even franchising it to some outsiders who might have other vested interests beyond that. And take even Somalia.
Yeah.
The history will tell you that even the Americans messed it up seriously by outsourcing the warlords and giving it to the warlords. But we have not learned from that. We are also there with the warlords.
But Simiyu, where do we move? Where do we move to?
I think let's look at this as quickly. I know you want me to answer you, but still look at Kenya. We are bordering Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a province called Zone 5. with the same population as us. So the issue of porous borders, I don't think, personally, it is a small segment of what we are going through. But I don't think this is an issue because we have a neighbor that has never had these problems for a long time. So I want to come back to what I said. Bad politics, and it's not about the political leadership now. I'm talking about the country's bad politics where we never like owning and taking care of what we need to deal with, but we spread it and throw it to others.
Barack, a year after Westgate, there's people here who were survivors, who survived that attack, including police officers. Given that there's bad politics, given that there's a sense of denial and pushing the problems that face us away from the center that perhaps is actually part of the problem, what would you like the government, the leadership, to stand up and tell the people who are here today, who are victims of yesterday's crimes? What would you like what commitment would you like to hear from them in order to move this forward and get some sort of resolution?
First, that we are not going to continue to be a country that gets used to bad things happening to us. We are used to receiving statistics. We know that after Westgate, there have been other assorted attacks here and there, which we are now taking as normal attacks. And when we hear that they have happened, we don't think about them beyond a few moments, that we are going to professionalize the security apparatus in this country, and that would be the first line of entry.
Yeah.
That beyond that, we must also ask ourselves what social interventions we have put in place, what kinds of dialogues we are having with ourselves. It's not enough to say that some youth somewhere are being radicalized. What alternative narratives are they being given? What alternative interventions of a dialogical nature are we having with ourselves? And Werunga is quite right that we have got Somalia, and Somalia also have troops in Somalia. Ethiopia have got troops in Somalia.
So
they are
Uganda.
not being hit the same way we are being hit. So there is a problem with us that even when we should be coming together and recognizing that we have been hit by a common enemy, we start pointing fingers at one another and blaming one another.
And pulling further apart. Let's hold that.
Going out even there to shoot youth is not necessarily what is going to heal this issue.
Let's hold that conversation there for a moment. Ali, let's go to you and see what people are saying online in response to some of the discussions that we're having here.
Na mtazamaji, asanteni sana. Kuna baadhi ya watu ambao tunafuatiliana pamoja katika mahojiano haya, saa kupitia ile hashtag ama alama ya reli KTN bottom line, ambayo kuna John Mwaka hapa anasema kwamba moyo kuona Wakenya wengi wako tayari kusaidia waathiriwa after siege. Mtazamaji, tutarudi tukupe mengi zaidi kutokamana na wale ambao wanaendelea kufuatilia mjadala huu kupitia hashtag ya KTN bottom line na pia vile vile ile hashtag ya after the siege. Twende upande wa pili wa studio kule Mombasa Road kwa mengi zaidi.